Another really significant work of art that we have here in the Statehouse Rotunda is the Lincoln and Soldiers Monument. And this monument was dedicated to all of the soldiers who fought in the American Civil War. It features a scene from the Battle of Vicksburg, which took place in Vicksburg, Mississippi. And you might ask, well, why do you have a scene from Vicksburg, Mississippi featured here in the Ohio Statehouse? Which is truly an excellent question. The Battle of Vicksburg was a significant turning point battle in the American Civil War. The Battle of Vicksburg was really important because Vicksburg was the last significant holdout along the Mississippi River. So once the Union was able to win this battle, they essentially had control of the Mississippi and were able to cut off the Confederacy supply lines. So this really was a very significant battle, particularly for the Union Army and for the Confederates who were trying to protect Vicksburg. The scene that's shown here in the battle shows on the left-hand side the Confederate generals, Bowen, Montgomery, and Pemberton. In his hand, Pemberton holds the muster roll, which is the list of soldiers who were involved in the battle, and he's handing that over to General Ulysses S. Grant, as well as Sherman and McPherson, who were also featured there in that battle as well. And this really helps to highlight that even though Ohio didn't have any major battles in the Civil War, Ohio still played a very significant role in the war, because all three of those Union generals, Grant, McPherson, and Sherman, were all born here in the state of Ohio. So this scene was picked not only because it was an important one in the Civil War, but also because it highlights the significance of Ohio. On the top of the monument, we see a bust of Abraham Lincoln. And this bust of Lincoln is especially important because it's one of the few in the country that we know for certain Lincoln sat in person for. So it's not based on photographs or drawings or paintings. The artist of the monument and the bust is Thomas Dow Jones. He's an Ohioan. He traveled to Springfield, Illinois, late December of 1860. He spent about 6 weeks with Abraham Lincoln, working a little bit every day on a clay bust of Lincoln. Typically, he would have about an hour to work. And when he was finished with the clay version, and when Lincoln traveled to Washington, D.C. to start serving as president, T.D. Jones then came back here to Ohio, took his clay bust, and used that as the model for this marble bust that you see as part of the monument. So it is a really unique and special one and a very significant part of our history, even though Lincoln, of course, is not from Ohio and he never lived here. He certainly is a very important American president and did have some interesting history here with the Ohio Statehouse. He gave his first public speech in Ohio, out on what was then the porch of the State House. He was here in September of 1859. He essentially gave a rehashing of his House Divided speech that he became so famous for in Illinois. He really talked about the Republican Party and talked about especially why the Republican Party was against the expansion of slavery. Lincoln was back here in the Ohio Statehouse in February of 1861. He was on his way to Washington, D.C. It was known at that time that he had won the popular vote of the election, but his election was still essentially contested. So it wasn't until he was right here in the State House when he received the official telegram from Washington, D.C. that he was in fact president-elect. So celebrations were held for him. He gave speeches here in the State House. He dined with the governor at the governor's mansion and spent the night with the governor. So it was really a very exciting time for the city of Columbus and for this building as well. Lincoln was also laid in repose here in the State House after his assassination, which took place in April of 1865, after he was shot in Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth and passed away the following morning. It was determined that the citizens should have the opportunity to pay their respects to him. So a train took his body from Washington, D.C., to Springfield, Illinois, where he is buried, stopped in the major northern cities along the way, including here in Columbus. The train stopped here on April 29th of 1865. Lincoln's casket was brought here to the center of the rotunda, and the casket remained here throughout the day on April 29th so that people could come through and pay their respects. And we believe about 50,000 people from all over the central Ohio region traveled here in order to take a few moments to walk past Lincoln's casket and pay their respects to him. So that was a very important day for the city of Columbus and for the Ohio Statehouse as well.